Good morning to you. Welcome back to First Up, the first stop in your busy day. And we continue to focus on elections 2010. This morning in this segment, we're going to take a different twist on the whole discussion. We're going to look at the mental state of everyone involved in the elections. Fazir.
Yes, because the whole question of the election, you know, there was a time, if you recall, at the end of 2000 we had a general election, at the end of 2001 we had another one, and then in October of 2002 we had another general election. People were talking about election fatigue. We had enough of it, and then we had one in 2007, and now, quite unexpectedly, to many people's eyes, halfway into the current term, we are going to have another general election. What does that mean to the psyche of the people of Trinidad and Tobago? What does it mean as far as the politicians and their own psyche, as far as getting ready, gearing up in a time of so many other challenges in Trinidad and Tobago? The state of mind of so many different people in relation to a general election. To give us some perspective, we have with us Darrell Joseph, a psychologist. He's a counseling psychologist. He's been in the practice now professionally for the better part of 5 years. Good to have you with us, Darrell.
Very pleasant good morning to you, Fazira. Very good morning to you, Jessimi.
The whole question of election fever, does that cause people to do strange things?
All right. Before I say anything else, let me make a position very, very clear.
Yes.
Because a couple of things that I may say, people may get the wrong impression.
Okay.
I am neither PNM nor UNC. I am strictly for the population of Trinidad and Tobago and for the people that I serve.
Yes.
Okay? This is the 5th general election that this country is having in the last 10 years. All right? This is not a healthy thing for the psyche of the population.
Why?
Why do I say that? All right, good. Election periods are periods of tension, periods of uncertainty, periods of stress, periods of anxiety. Studies have shown that there's a clear relationship between anxiety, things that happen in the social realm, things that happen in the country, in the community, and so on, and diminished mental health. All right, there have been studies in Latin America, studies in North America in particular, that have demonstrated this very, very clearly, okay? There's also the whole effect of unexpected events, right? Instability, things happening out of, you know, when people don't expect and so on. We have had, this is, as I said, this is the 5th time in 10 years, and all of these, you know, all of the instability, the uncertainty, and so on, it will have a negative effect upon the psyche of the population.
You talked about studies outside of Trinidad and Tobago. Do we have any evidence of clinical studies in Trinidad and Tobago to support your statement?
I am not absolutely sure about that. There should be, and they very well may, but I have not been privy to that information. Has it been done?
A counter to your point of stress is that some people actually say that they enjoy when we are in election mode. They enjoy the excitement, they enjoy the bacchanal, they love the heightened level of activity. Certainly we in the media get a tremendous amount of money from advertising and so on. But people just like the fact that, that we are in an election mode.
Yes.
And isn't there something to say for that? That there is a heightened level of excitement and activity?
Okay, for some people, yes, it does represent a sort of, as you say, a bacchanal, a kind of a freeing up. And certainly if you're involved in the rallies, you know, the various meetings and so on, then that's like a bit of an excursion for you, all right? But just like anything else, you know, there's often positive sides and there's a negative side as well. And what I'm saying is, nationally, if we were to somehow be able to weight on a scale, nationally, what I'm saying is the effect of these elections over and over, the negative side outweighs the positive.
And what would you say would be the negative consequences of having, let's say, for the sake of argument, too many elections in a short space of time?
All right. Let me point out something that is very particular about our situation in Trinidad and Tobago. Because of the demographics of our country and the polarity of voting lines, you find that at any point in time, close to 50% of our population is very happy and satisfied with things as they are, and close to 50% is very dissatisfied, disillusioned, upset, etc., etc., etc. And that's a constant state of, you know, unhappiness that we have to live with.
Clearly, we're talking along, let's say, ethnic lines, racial lines. We have predominantly Indian-based, predominantly African-based, and so on. But haven't we moved on from that to a certain degree? Is there any clinical evidence to suggest that people aren't so much polarized along ethnic lines as we have taken it for granted in previous years?
I do not know that there is clinical evidence, as you're saying, studies to show that. But certainly, I mean, over and beyond the scientific data, you can gauge things based upon what you actually see and what you actually hear. And I think based upon that, you know, the question, it's still a very valid question, whether that polarity remains.
But what else do we do I mean, we are a democratic country.
Yes.
We have general elections. Is it a case of making it a more disciplined or regulated process, like in the United States, where come hell or high water, elections are held every 4 years, so you don't have to worry about it anymore. Once it's over and done with, you know the next one will not be for another 4 years?
Yeah. Okay, well, before I say something about that, let me mention something else, all right? I'm a very firm believer that in the Caribbean and in Trinidad and Tobago, we have to look for our solutions to our problems, all right? I think far too often we try to tailor, you know, get solutions from outside that have worked elsewhere and tailor them, customize them to what we have here, right? I think, and this might sound a little bit controversial, but what the heck, let me go ahead and say it anyway, all right?
You're on the right program for that.
Good. The system of politics that we have right now, I don't think it serves our population as best as it could be served. Alluding to what I was saying earlier on, that at any point in time, close to 50% of our population feels disenfranchised, helpless, as though they can't do anything. They have no say, they have no input. I don't think that's the best system for us. Now, as to exactly what the terms and conditions of that new system would be, because, I mean, there was a lot of talk during the last regime about constitutional reform and so on. But what I'm saying is, in order for the psyche of our population to be better served by the politics, there needs to be a drastic change to the way we do it right now.
Speaking with Darrell Joseph, a counseling psychologist, and trying to get a sense of the psychological impact of elections and electioneering and being in an election period, 5 general elections in the space of 10 years. Send us your text messages as well at 78247. Type in the word talk, leave a space, type in your message and send it to 78247. Jesse.
We have a post here from Jason. He says 5 elections in 10 years, that's democracy at work, and we are eager to return the polls. It's the only way we get to effect change. Now, how do you respond to someone like that?
Okay, I don't know exactly what Jason's particular slant in terms of his preference is, all right? But I could imagine that somebody who feels as though we need to actually go ahead and have an election because things are not going well as they are. I could well imagine somebody with that position thinking that, yes, it's a good thing. So, I mean, I can't comment based upon, you know, not knowing exactly what his particular stance is, but overexposure to stress and tension and anxiety in no language is ever a good thing.
Let's look at the lead up to this current election. Over the past 2 or 3 years, you've seen the headlines in the newspapers, high levels of crime and gruesome, brutal killings at that, rising food prices, unemployment, uncertainty, political instability in one form or another. Some are saying that the Calder-Hart Udicott issue is what has brought this current administration to its knees. All of those things are extremely stressful.
That's right.
Let's look at how they've been impacting on people mentally.
And there's you realize you made a connection. There's a definite strong connection between these very stressful, anxiety-causing events and yet another election. Okay, they're all tied together. It's all one. It's all part of one system. And I mean, you just need to look and see what's happening outside there on our streets, for example. The amount of tension that people, you know, anxiety and anger and aggression and so on that people are experiencing. And it's all because of these things that are happening. There's a term, social trauma. It's a very real term, huh? All right? A trauma is anything that causes a person to feel a sense of fear, a sense of panic, a sense of hopelessness and helplessness and so on. And social trauma refers to events that happen within the society that bring about that kind of those kind of feelings, you know, that kind of mood and so on. So all of these events that are happening, the crime, the political instability, the distrust, you know, I mean, there's always some story going on. A government comes in and everything looks fine for a while and then little things begin surfacing, it's like a pattern over and over again, you know. And I mean, look also at how much the electorate will trust the political process and the politicians over time. Yes, people come out and vote and so on, but I mean, we're really gauging, you know, how much people trust the entire process now.
I'm glad you raised that point, because at the very start of our simulcast today, I was making the point that we have fully 1/3 of the electorate who don't vote.
Yes.
can we therefore say that, you know, this whole question about stress and anxiety and so on is exaggerated in the Trinidad and Tobago context, that for a significant proportion of the electorate, they just don't care one way or the other?
Well, you could say they don't care, but you could also say they're so distressed by the situation that they choose not to take part in it because they feel as though they might be wasting their time or making a bad situation worse.
We have a comment here. This is Edmund. He says, how can 5 elections in 10 years be any more or less destructive than allowing a government to continue with arguably poor governance, having difficulty passing required legislation, or improving state efficiency in service delivery? So he's weighing the stresses.
Yeah.
I mean, is there such a thing as good social trauma and bad social trauma,
No.
or is all social trauma bad?
No, social trauma is not a good thing. All right, social trauma is not a good thing. Were the elections independent of that list of things that Mr. Edmund, all right, just stated there, were the elections independent of those things, we could probably make an argument that, well, you know, it's just democracy at work. But let's face it, the elections are happening because of those things that are going on. There's always events that precipitate these snap elections and these elections before time. For nearly 40 years, we had elections roughly every 5 years, all right, between 56 and what, 91?
Yes.
All right. And then from 95 onwards, it's 1772, it's 1818, it's somebody crossing the floor, it's something else, it's allegations of corruption, it's allegations of cheating and voter padding and so on.
Kieran is saying here that we are reacting to these kinds of stresses in different ways. The road rage that we're seeing is just one manifestation of that social trauma.
Correct.
But Darrell, I'm trying to get an understanding of the Trinidad and Tobago circumstance, because even right here in the Caribbean, you hear it said, Trinis really don't care about anything. You know, we just, you know, Monday fall on a Sunday don't really make a difference. Jamaicans are said to be very aggressive, very. They will, you know, jump on a pedestal and champion any cause if they feel it fit. Barbadians more disciplined and so on, much more sedate but much more organized in their way of doing things. In the Trinidad and Tobago context, because it is felt that we get worked up about something, but then just boil down like Baji shortly after. Isn't that a bit of a stress reliever in itself, that maybe the talk about social trauma and stress in that sense might be exaggerated?
Right. The human psyche attempts to protect itself by creating what's called defense mechanisms. All right? So a defense mechanism is anything that keeps my stability, keeps my psyche at a level point where I can continue to function. Different groups of people and different individuals within those groups have their own defense mechanisms. One of the defense mechanisms that we employ nationally is to make light of everything. All right? So everything is a cause for a party, everything is a cause for a drink or a lime or something like that. But why are those things happening? Those things are attempts to distract us from whatever is immediately in front of us bothering us. And the fact of the matter is, after the party and after the drinks wear off and everything, you still face with it. Were that not the case, then we just came out of a carnival period, right? There should be no problems in the country right now. If it were that when we do these things, they're effective and they have lasting, you know, lasting power to relieve us of the stress and tension that we experience, then crime should drop after carnival. Then there should be less road rage after carnival. Then, you know, people should generally be more loving and more caring and more concerned about each other. But I mean, you look at the front page of the paper.
Yeah. Do politicians make it worse? And I'm glad you gave the statement early on that you are not taking sides with any political party. But do politicians make it worse, especially when you're on an election campaign and they are prepared to do whatever is necessary to win the day, to win your vote?
Yes, and again, I'll repeat for Trinidad and Tobago's sake, I am neither for nor against anybody, but honestly, I believe they do. One of the ways that happens is what I call the fear factor. All right, fear is used on either side, on both sides, on all sides, all right? Fear of what could happen if the other side were to get in is one of the tactics that's very heavily used. Now, when you introduce the element of fear into somebody, you raise their level of anxiety again, all right? I suppose all politicians do it, but we have to look at Trinidad and Tobago, right? It's a very, very heavily used tactic here in particular, and it's just not healthy for us. It's not healthy for us at all.
How does that resonate with the public itself? Because, again, it takes me back to the question, and I might be repeating myself in that sense. Do people really buy into that? When you turn up at a particular meeting and they say, well, is them or us? that sort of mentality. Do people really believe that? Do they feel alienated if their party is not in power?
Okay. As a psychologist, one of the things I like to do is to actually go out into the field, all right, and see things for myself. Now, over the last, I would say the last general election in particular, I actually went out into a couple of the different political meetings just to get a sort of a vibe and a feel for what goes on, right? And because I had the same question as well, I thought to myself, it's just a show. They're just doing that, all right? For zero, I don't think so. Based upon the kinds of the emotion and the passion that I saw coming out of people, I really believe there's a number of people who believe those things. It's us, and if them get in and we can't, you know, the whole us, them kind of thing. And like if they get in, it's disaster, things are going to be terrible for us. No, they're not checking to see if things are terrible for them all the time. But anyway, things are going to be terrible, things are going to be worse, etc., etc. I really believe people think these things. A number of people do.
A couple texts coming in. I think it's irresponsible to place this kind of pressure on the population yet again. That's one. Another, 5 elections in 10 years is too much. I am wary as a voter. Another text, generally all races live harmoniously in TNT, but the politicians incite racial tensions at election time. Another text, I have opted not to vote because when you look at the major parties' history, who do you choose? The lesser of two evils? And that not being able to find an alternative that you can live with, that many people say is a major source of stress for them.
Correct.
Now, when a politician hears that, they also go through their own kinds of emotional trauma and mental stress, don't they? Let's look at things from the politician side, if we can.
All right. That's a very interesting question. We made a little joke offset before you started. You know, you were asking me about the mental state of certain politicians, and I said, well, let them come and see me for a session. All right? And I'll evaluate them and tell you, all right?
Boss, all the money is for the media during this election campaign, and no money for you.
If you want to get his contact information, send us an email at firstup@ctntworld.com. Yes, but go ahead.
All right. To be perfectly honest, I really am being 100% honest. I am not certain exactly how these things affect the seasoned politician. Let me put it that way. Because there's another condition where a person can become desensitized to something over time. All right, you see it in surgeons, for example. They're very comfortable cutting people up and, you know, moving organs around and so things that I could never do. All right, I could sit down and listen to somebody cry about something all day, all night, but to actually cut somebody, I can't do that. Right? People become desensitized. I want to believe that a lot of politicians do become desensitized to these things over time, and so it's easier for them to focus on what they believe is the correct solution or correct approach to a problem or a situation.
Is that what leads to the disconnect between the politicians and the people, leading them to make decisions that are bad for the people?
That, plus the fact that when you get into politics, you tend to be surrounded by people who tell you often what you want to hear, all right? If you are not very good at keeping your ears close to the ground, and if you're not very honest with yourself and very grounded, it can be extremely easy to slip into a very comfortable zone where you believe that whatever you think or whatever, you know, whatever course of action you believe should be pursued is the correct one.
I'm listening to you talking about listening to people crying all the time, and I have this image in my mind. After the general election, there'll be 41 people in your office crying about losing the election and so on. But that will keep you very busy after the election. But also, the question of the Trinidad and Tobago psyche. Are we essentially an insecure people that you know, you need the reassurance of a leader, of a politician to promise you these things? Why is it that we seem so willing to take on board what anybody says, as outlandish as it might seem, as unrealistic as it might seem, and actually believe it? Yeah. And again, we're talking all sides, PNM, UNC, COP, DLP, whoever, that there's a segment of the population in Trinidad and Tobago that is almost willing to follow these leaders like the Pied Piper.
You use the word insecurity there, and I thought about something. Again, I don't have scientific numbers to back this up, all right? But have you ever noticed a trend that when Trinidadians, for example, migrate, there seems to be, okay, more Trinidadians who develop the fresh water, if you want to call it that, all right, who seem to merge into the society that they migrate to a lot more than people from even other Caribbean countries. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, good, okay. I said I don't have numbers to represent, but it's generally accepted that it is so. I think that's reflective of some kind of insecurity that we have about our nation, about who we are as a people, about the integrity of what we do and what we produce and so on. And I think that's very often reflected in what you're saying there, that people often, because they're insecure and uncertain about themselves, they look for somebody who seems sure and who seems certain to follow, so that they could get that security and they could get that stability that, everybody needs and wants and looks for.
Hence the fellow walking into the roti shop on Saturday, as I pointed out, and ordering a chicken roti a couple of days ago. But again, it's an important point. But what do we do as what do you do as an individual to avoid getting too worked up, whether it's about an election or whether it's about the person bad driving in front of you?
Okay, very good. Serenity prayer. Do you know it? Serenity prayer?
Yes.
What is it? God grant me the wisdom.
To change, the courage to change the things that I can, the ability to accept the things that I can't,
right,
and the wisdom to know the difference.
All right, okay. Despite my inability to regurgitate the prayers clearly as you did, all right? The spirit of it is very true, and it's something I hold on to and I use with clients very often, all right? There's some things you can change, there's some things you can't change. And the things that you can't change, you really have to make an effort to leave them alone. All right, that's one. So what I'm saying then is that despite I can vote, but I may not be able to change the overall, the overall result of the election, and I still have to live the next day. I still have to get up and go to work and feed my children, should I have any, feed myself, do the things that I need to do, okay? So it's not something that, my worry or my anxiety is going to change or impact in any significant way. Next thing, I have to absolutely look after myself, and there are things that we all need to do to look after ourselves, all right? Aside from remaining at peace and remaining at harmony with yourself and so on, RED, rest, exercise, and diet. We all need to do these things. I mean, it's not a show where we're talking about that,
yes,
but we need to pay attention to these things, okay? But I think the key thing for people to acknowledge and realize is that life goes on. All right?
Of course, that is easier said than done for a lot of people. And we had a politician on the program, well, a lawyer politician who said, you could, on the program last week, who said, you could imagine, think about it, you wake up after the election and the PNM still in power, think how depressing that is. So that feeds into the psyche, So is it really easier said than done?
It is easier said than done. That's why persons like myself have a career, all right? Because we help people manage those kinds of things.
Darrell, we have a text here. Someone saying politicians use the people to divide and conquer. Basically, we are the collateral damage. Speak to the collateral damage out there, because that clearly is a statement from someone feeling hopeless and helpless to bring about any sort of change in their circumstances in the country.
Yeah, I don't like that phrase because it was used some time ago in a particular context and it left a kind of sour taste in many people's mouth, all right? The phrase collateral damage. I'm not going any further into that, but you know what I'm talking about,
I know the reference, yeah.
I think that there is some truth with respect to that, very honestly, because you cannot get into power unless you go into power on the backs of people who support you, all right? If your intentions are sincere, if you go about doing things in a way that you're really concerned about the people that you're serving, then everybody benefits. If there's any other motive or if there's any other goal in mind, then the same people who helped to get you there would face the effects of whatever happens thereafter. And I mean, let's face it, the people who get in, you are looked after. Your basic needs are attended to and so on. When I say basic needs, I really, really mean basic needs: housing, clothing, food, etc., etc., etc. Those things you're looked after, okay? It's the people who get you there really the ones who are either going to benefit or suffer at the end of the day.
Before we conclude this half an hour of free advice with Darrell Joseph, counseling psychologist, what would you say to those, finally, just a bit of advice to those who tend to get too worked up, either in a positive sense or in a negative sense, especially at election time?
Okay. So alluding to what I said before, relax. Okay? Easier said than done, but think about this. Will my anxiety, will my working myself up, will my tension, will my pressure make any meaningful and real change to the outcome or to what happens after the outcome, the policies and and things that are implemented? It's far more likely that if I get myself worked up, my medical bills will go up, all right? I may have to visit a psychologist, okay? Etc., etc. The damage is going to be done to me. So I mean, yes, it's it's hard and there's a lot of tension and so on. But at the end of the day, what really is going to be the outcome of this?
Darrell Joseph, good to get your perspective this morning, and who knows, you'll have a lot more business after the general election. At least 41 will be lining up behind his door trying to get some advice. And he, as he said, he's a broad shoulders, so they could cry on his shoulders for 41 days and 41 nights after the general election, whenever that is. Good to have you on the program this morning. We have the latest coming up for you at the top of the hour.